Hey, gang. Welcome to another episode of Up the Middle. I am your host, Yergz. Getting used to the cool toys. You can find more about me at yergz.com. There it is. And don't forget to subscribe right here to any of these platforms and others that you can find back at yergz.com. So, don't forget, take back the flag. That's for all of us, not just the far, far right knuckleheads that are using that as a battle flag. In this episode, we were talking to a former colleague of mine, fellow gay Secret Service agent turned author, Cory Allen, and has written his first book, Breaking Free. Let's see it without the glare. There we go. Breaking Free. It's his autobiography about coming out while still in the Secret Service. As is so often the case with interviews that we get here at Up the Middle, this one was pretty intense, good amount of time, so we're going to split it up into 2 episodes. Let's get started with episode 1. Former coworker, former fellow Secret Service agent Cory Allen with us. Cory, welcome. Thanks for joining Up the Middle.
Thank you for having me, and it is great to see you again. I believe it's been 3 or 4 years since I last saw you, somewhere in WeHo.
Wow, possibly. I'm here in Florida for coming up on 2. Lived up in the actual famous Hollywood Hills for a little bit, and then South Hollywood. But yeah, it was great seeing you then. Great seeing you again today. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Read the book, Cory's book, Breaking Free. Oh, there we go. Virtual backgrounds are fun. How's yours working better than mine? Look at you. Breaking Free, even just from the title and the kind of running gag of the lapel pin on the front cover, I could literally relate from the front cover all the way through. I didn't necessarily have you talk about, having a broken up family throughout your life and relocating. My parents are still married, but there's still so many things that, through childhood, through eventually coming out, and just through, dealing everything with an adult. I'm like, yeah, that's me. This is my book. Yeah, I did that same everything. From Pennsylvania, where you first grew up or started growing up, to Virginia, and the moving around, did you feel like every kid did that?
No,
Did you feel that was
I know.
normal, or did you knew something was, new with your family?
uh, Mom has been married multiple times, and so there was always a little bit of instability growing up. Where we even when I was 7, we moved to Virginia from Western Pennsylvania. But then we moved apartments around. We always stayed in the Richmond, Virginia area, but we tended to move around every few years. And it actually wasn't until I was 16 or 17 that Mom actually bought a house in that same town in Mechanicsville, Virginia. And that was like the first time that we were putting down roots
Right.
there after, living there for the majority of my life at that point. So I knew we were a little bit odd because most everybody, my friends and all, that was where they were born and raised, whereas we just moved around a little bit.
And then you had grandparents that stayed back in Pennsylvania that you also got to shuffle back and forth that way as well. Any type of like, because and what I'm getting at is that, eventually there's these things that, could be so normal to so many other kids who don't have to also have their sexuality in the back of their mind from possibly quite a young age. So was there ever anything where one started to get you thinking about the other?
Um, my mom and my siblings, we were the only ones that moved to Virginia. So the rest of my family was still in Western PA, and to this day, in Virginia and now South Carolina. Mom and my siblings were the only ones that actually left. So my grandparents remained in Pennsylvania until they passed away. All my cousins and nieces, all that was still back in Western PA. So we made frequent trips
Right.
back to Pennsylvania, daydreaming out the car window. But then that became my childhood home. When my grandma passed, my grandfather moved into that home, and that became my stability, my rock through my life until he passed away when I was 30. He was the one constant through all of that. And so my father was absent for a number of years of my uh, early life. And my grandfather filled that role of becoming my mentor, my idol, my hero. But also, I could just go home to his house and spend a weekend or spend a week and just be there to recenter and calm. And so it worked out beautifully
Right.
because I got to have that relationship with my grandfather.
Right. Key. And again, that was you talked about. Was it Papa or Papa or Pap? How did you refer to
Pap, yeah,
him? Yeah. Yeah.
Pap,
Yeah. Uh,
P-A-P.
and on my dad's side, his stepfather was Pop, and not that my mom's parents weren't quality, but yeah, there was just some there's a connection in one way, and others there's a connection with another way. So everything you mentioned was something that was easily relatable, and throughout the whole thing, throughout your career, you talk about trips, you talk about essentially seeing history. And you talked about the day that you watched the Obamas get on Marine One for the last time. The last time I blew through DC in a motorcade with Hillary Clinton is like I'm sitting in the follow up right now. It was so much that uh, while providing the everyday reader a unique perspective, there's so many of your colleagues that are going to be able to say, yeah, this isn't just about his sexuality. This is about a professional life and a well performed job.
Yeah, it was when I went into, I wrote this book first and foremost for myself. When I moved to California in 2019, I had been through 10 or 15 years of just history and everything that you just kind of mentioned, but also I'd never stopped to take time to process everything that I'd been through. And there was a lot, as you know, there's a
Yeah.
lot in this book. It's all over the place, um, professionally and personally. But then I wanted to do the service justice. The book was not about the Secret Service,
Right.
but I wanted to, as I wrote it and I learned how cathartic it was for me during the pandemic, I started to think, well, maybe I should do something with this and maybe it'll help other people because it was super easy for me. To write it, it just flowed. I wrote it in 60 hours. Uh, it was just easy. I don't know, it just came to me. But it's my story, so it makes sense that it wouldn't be that
Yeah.
difficult. Um, but trying to give my respect to the Secret Service and to my former colleagues and peers, such as yourself, it was important that I try and represent it fairly, but also very honestly about
Yeah.
what it's like living that life.
Right. So, one of the things I'm going through right now, you had talked about the pandemic, and probably one of the things you're at least getting into is talking about the stress of not just the Secret Service, but I think law enforcement in general. Do you feel like there are more of our colleagues? Like I'm recently been diagnosed with PTSD, and I was kind of offended at first because my experiences are nothing like
Matrix.
what people I know from the military or have been in foreign wars and so on. But remembering through things like the pandemic and after, I'd be in a grocery store, I'd just start break down crying in public. Do you think something like that is more, regardless of whether it's from a broken home or law enforcement or combination? Do you think there are a lot more of us going through that we don't necessarily know about?
Yes, yes. In short, as I wrote this, and I realized there was underlying trauma, whether it was
Yeah.
domestic violence in the home, whether it was a divorce that I hadn't processed, just the fears and the cycle that is being in law enforcement and the trauma that we're exposed to. I was a police officer before I was a Secret Service agent, and you see the bad side of society and death. And so all that gets bottled up and we carry that around with us everywhere. So yes, I absolutely believe there's stuff that needs to be unpacked. And when I met Johnny, my now fiance, um, and we started to get serious, and that aligned with the pandemic as well, that timing did. I enlisted the help of a therapist because it's like, okay, if I'm writing this and my developmental editor was trying to pull more details out, but it was literally breaking down crying while I'm doing it, was a huge red flag that, okay, I need to dig more into this on a personal level
Right.
with a therapist to make sure that I don't repeat past mistakes in relationships, that I present my truest and best self to Johnny, um, to try and uncover as much as possible. And it's been I've had my therapist for over 2 years, probably 2.5 years now.
Nice.
Um, just talked to him on Monday, actually. So
I
it's
had one
good to do,
earlier today, and I got another one tomorrow. I got two.
but it's needed, and
Yeah.
that's part of taking the rhetoric away from it that it's viewed as a negative in parts of society, and that's not the
Right.
case at all. We should all be doing mental health check-ins. We
Right.
bust our asses at the gym to take care of ourselves and eat well. Our brain is more and more important than all of that. So
It's one of the two things that I believed that I won't say just the Secret Service. I'll say the law enforcement community needs to do better with their employees, and that is one is the mental health and the financial health. We can get videos on, LMS, throwback to part of your Secret Service time on how to use a fire extinguisher or a lawnmower, but we can't get videos on how to use TSP or how to go talk to somebody.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's and that's probably the two much more important and beneficial moments that we could use. You mentioned
Yeah,
about
there's
just go ahead. No, go ahead.
no, there's definitely a need for
Yeah,
all of that.
I want to backtrack for a second because I did miss. We did get to some of the later parts a little sooner. You mentioned about playing outside and just going out and playing. I'm watching a video on excellence and creativity, and one of the guests that they're interviewing is Wayne Gretzky from the NHL. And he comments about kids today are so structured and they're so connected. You can take five kids to a pond that's frozen over and say, go play, and they wouldn't know what to do. Where his generation looked for that frozen pond to go play a hockey game. Do you see from our generations of just being outside and playing? And I remember the one chapter you commented about how you lived through your childhood because of the way you guys played as kids was a miracle in and of itself. With the connected generations that are today, how do you see yourself parenting when that day comes to the connectivity that is a normal part of everyday child today versus the other opportunities that they've got?
A balanced approach. We are in surrogacy right now. We have two surrogates. So we are full steam ahead. We've been in the surrogacy process for 2 years. I will dive into that at a later point. Happy to talk at length about that to anybody. But no, we are going to take a balanced approach where they'll know and understand what all these with the technology and access and the importance that is now intertwined in their education.
Right.
Everybody's on a laptop compared to you and I. We didn't have laptops to work from in
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but also know the importance of being in a safe area so they can go outside and play, and they will be forced out, but also not forced out like I was, but um, taught to be outside and
Right.
taking them and leading by example of taking them to play tennis, to be out roughhousing with the dog in the yard, to whatever outdoor recreational stuff we can get into. We are absolutely going to be doing that because we're not going to be raising um, children who know nothing other than their iPhone. That
Right.
is not, they'll know and understand all of that. There's going to be limits, and it's going to be a balanced approach.
Good for you. What is your youngest memory of you considering you're questioning the traditional sexuality, like that you probably don't want to grow up and marry a woman.
Uh, I knew something was different as early as I think it was 9, of having sexual urges, which I thought was odd for that being that young. Even then, it struck me as a little bit because my brothers, who were 2 years older, never talked about it, never mentioned anything of the sort. But then my childhood best friend was actually like the first indicator. Once I hit puberty, I was like, oh, I am attracted to this person. There's no denying
I remember
that
reading that.
attraction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if, we didn't dare cross any lines, and he is not. He's straight, married to a woman with kids, great guy. So I made no mention of it until this book came out. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I assume that he knows now because it's in there. I just gave him a different name, and that was age 13 or so, I think.
Okay. What, how did you grow up then handling things like gay jokes? If everybody around you was presuming you were as straight as they were, what did that do to you?
Hard to tell. It certainly instills shame. And that's something our community just has to deal with, and that's
Yeah.
not acceptable. Where you just deal with it, you endure it, and that in trying to overcome that shame and realizing that there is nothing wrong with us. We are not abnormal. We are like this
Right.
is who we are. This is how we were born, and this is how we were made. So it takes a lot to overcome that shame, and that still reverberates today.
Yeah.
Even this leadership class I was in, Johnny and I, it's a picture of us on the, lock screen of my iPhone. And when I get to a table, I put it face down because I don't know a bunch of other supervisory special agents at the table. I don't know where they come from. I don't know how they're going to react. And obviously in law enforcement, it's not very gay friendly. And
Right.
so that was just last week, and I still do that until I get comfortable enough to then know that, okay, this might be a safe environment. And I don't know if that's
Right.
based in shame or fear, but it's still, all these years later, is still part of how we go about.
I feel it's also in a way kind of sort of like customer service, like you're doing them a favor by not putting them into some sort of awkward position when they say, "Who's the dude?" and that's my fiance, and they have a stupid look on their face.
Yeah, because you see it like I've been traveling a lot for work lately, back and forth to DC and Georgia, wherever. And Bros was playing on a flight, and somebody was watching it 2 rows ahead of me, and I can see their screen. But the guy that was in between us, the disgust on his face and his actions, that he couldn't fathom that somebody was watching this movie on a plane. And so he pulls out his iPhone and is zooming in to take pictures and video the passenger in front of him who's watching Bros.
Right.
Tells you, like, you still see that nonsense today of this guy is so ignorant and
So
in
you
his
pull
own
your
world
iPhone out and say, "Look at this asshole."
right. And of course I don't, because I have tact.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but that plays into that same environment where, am I
Right.
safe? Is this a good
Right.
environment for me to expose this part of myself? And that sucks.
Had you been out at all, not just what I always called, people like me and you, the Secret Service, but had you been out at all before you left the Secret Service? Was it common knowledge, or is this book also for them as well? That's going to do it for part one of our interview with Cory Allen. Hang around for part two. Don't forget, in your socials, use the hashtag #TakeBackTheFlag. That's for everyone. All of us have the American flag that's behind me right now and is outlining the screen. That is our country's flag, not for the far right, not for the far left, or any other extremist group. Also, If you want to find any of the other videos, go right here to yergz.com and you can see past videos, our most recent video. You can also find where you can get us on the audio only type of podcasting, as well as my speaking engagements and so many other things with the Yergz Group. Right there, yergz.com. We'll see you there. Hang tight. We'll get on with part 2 next.